How are you feeling today? Have you ever felt this way? One morning you wake up, look around, and somehow everything feels different. The conversations that once excited you now echo hollow. The people you once tried so hard to please suddenly feel distant. You're still in the same place, surrounded by familiar faces, but something deep inside has shifted. That's the beginning of awakening, a quiet movement within, like a small caterpillar realizing in silence it's about to become a butterfly. Yet all around it, the forest is still full of caterpillars, peacefully crawling on leaves, believing that their existence is all the world could ever be. You look at them, then back at yourself and realize you're standing at a strange in-between, no longer belonging to where you were, but not yet knowing where you're going. It's a peculiar feeling, not painful, but tightening. It's not a tragic experience, but rather a feeling of quiet loneliness, like standing in a crowded room, hearing a sound that only you can hear. That is the first moment of awakening, when the world around you remains the same, but you are no longer who you used to be. There is no growth without pain. Fundamentally, growth involves the act of departure. It involves shedding the outer layer that once shielded you. It involves letting go of the things that once provided you with a sense of safety. You are leaving behind the version of yourself that once fit but no longer does. Imagine a lobster. As it grows, its outer shell becomes tight, pressing in, suffocating. To survive, it must break free, shedding its armor, exposing its soft, fragile body to the vast ocean. In that moment, it becomes the most vulnerable creature alive. A single ripple could destroy it, but if it refuses to be shed, it will die trapped inside its own safety. Humans are no different. When your consciousness begins to expand, your old shells, beliefs, relationships, roles, habits start to feel too small for the soul that's trying to grow. You begin to suffocate in the very things that once brought you comfort. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispers, "It's time to go." But go where? You don't know. You only know that staying would slowly kill your spirit. So you step out trembling, raw, unsure, and like the lobster in the deep sea, you enter a chapter without armor. No one fully understands you. Nothing feels certain. But in that nakedness, your true self is finally born. Growth is never comfortable. It's a surgery without anesthesia, but it's also the only doorway to freedom. When you begin to change, a subtle temptation quietly appears, the thought that you now understand more, feel deeper, and are somehow more awakened than others. That is the most delicate trap of the ego. The ego never truly dies. It simply changes its costume. It sheds its material shell, then slips into a new spiritual robe. It stops boasting about wealth, but begins to boast about enlightenment. It no longer competes over status, but now wants to prove it is more conscious than the rest. True awakening doesn't make you feel higher. It makes you feel smaller. Smaller in humility, smaller in reverence for every soul still learning how to live, smaller in your recognition that everyone is precisely where they need to be on their path. You are not above anyone. You simply see differently, like someone who has opened their eyes to a landscape while others are still asleep. But even their sleep is a sacred part of the same journey. When you are truly awake, you no longer seek to change others. You only seek to live more truthfully within yourself. No preaching, no proving. There is no requirement for belief, because awakening is not a title. It is a state of presence. Quiet, humble, and profoundly human. Then one day, you realize something in this world isn't quite real. Not because it's fake, but because it isn't deep enough. The things people tirelessly chase, money, status, safety, reputation, once seemed like the purpose of life. But now, something in you begins to whisper that perhaps all those important things are only a glossy coating. All those important things are only a glossy coating over a quiet emptiness underneath. You begin to notice the laughter-filled conversations that somehow lack presence. Family dinners where everyone is together yet elsewhere. People live to be seen but never really knowing who they are. And suddenly, you see the world as a stage. Each person performing their role, the successful one, the kind one, the moral one, the victim. Each line was perfectly memorized. Yet everyone is forgetting the simplest truth. This isn't the real play. Sometimes it takes a rupture, a moment of stillness, a crisis, a collapse to tear open the curtain, and behind it you see reality isn't as solid as you once thought. It bends, it breathes. It reflects the very consciousness that observes it. From that moment on, you begin to live between two worlds. One, the everyday world, where people talk of careers, politics, and plans. And the other, the inner world, where you feel the subtle rhythm of existence, a quiet pulse behind all motion, a silence behind every word. You cannot reject either world, but you can no longer fully belong to just one. You stand at the threshold between form and essence, and it is there. In that trembling, luminous space in between, that is when the true journey of awakening begins. When you begin to live between two levels of awareness, you discover something quietly heartbreaking. You and the old world no longer speak the same language. Conversations that once flowed easily now feel strained. Friends who once felt close now sound foreign. You sit among familiar faces listening to talk about plans, money, status, and inside a small echo asks, does any of this stuff still mean anything? You don't hate them. It's just that a part of you has moved beyond the layer where they still dwell. You see what they can't yet see, and that makes it impossible to belong in the same way again. People around you begin to sense it. Even in your silence, your energy feels different. You no longer light up in shallow conversations. You no longer react as expected. You stop playing by the rules of the world they believe is real, and that unsettles them. Because if you can step outside the framework, then maybe the framework itself isn't real. You become a mirror, reflecting back on the parts of themselves they have tried not to question. And not everyone is ready to face that reflection. Some will try to pull you back. You've changed. You're not the same anymore. Do you think you're better than us? Their words aren't cruel. They come from fear. Fear that if you've changed, then everything they trust might begin to crack too. Others will drift away quietly. No anger, no blame, just the quiet distance that grows when two frequencies no longer meet. One by one, connections fall away, like autumn leaves releasing themselves from the branch, and you find yourself in a vast, empty space where there is no noise, only the dense silence of solitude. But in that silence, something miraculous begins to happen. For the first time, your soul starts to hear. The one voice it had been drowning out all along, this is the voice of truth. As the distance between you and the old world widens, you eventually arrive at a quiet crossroads. Will you live true to what you've seen or pretend you never saw it at all? Most people choose the second path. They stay silent, nod politely, and smile at the right times. They say what's expected, do what's acceptable, and only at night when they are finally alone do they allow themselves to breathe. It's a kind of double life of the soul. During the day, you wear a mask to fit in. By night, you take it off to survive. At first, it seems wise. You think, At least I keep the peace and the job, the friends, the family. But over time, you realize the cost of fitting in is the slow disappearance of who you are. Because nothing drains the soul more than pretending not to know what it already knows. You can hide your words, but you can't hide your energy. People feel that you're no longer the same. And you feel it too. The quiet split inside you. One half longing to be honest, the other is terrified of being alone. Living that way, you start to feel hollow. You no longer find yourself in the mirror. You smile, but the echo of that smile feels distant. You speak, but the voice doesn't sound like your own. That is inner estrangement. Inner estrangement is a subtle yet persistent form of betrayal. It doesn't break you all at once. It simply drains the light from within, one breath at a time. And then, one day, the question arrives, clear, sharp, and impossible to ignore. Can I keep living a lie just to stay in the world I've outgrown? Or will I risk losing everything to finally be myself? That is the threshold moment when an awakening soul must choose to live fully true or to live fully afraid. There will come a stage when everything you once trusted, clung to, and called life begins to crack and fall apart. Not because anyone betrayed you, but because your consciousness has simply grown too large to fit back inside the old cage. The things that once made you feel safe now feel meaningless. The people who once made you feel at home now only deepen your sense of isolation. You try to go back to pretend you haven't changed, but you can't. Once your eyes have seen the light, they cannot pretend to be blind again, and that is the beginning of the dark night of the soul. But this night is not the darkness of despair. It is the darkness of transformation. It's like the moment when a caterpillar dissolves inside its cocoon. Every old structure is disintegrating. Every familiar shape is disappearing. To make space for something entirely new, you feel empty, lost, and torn apart. You start to question, have I taken the wrong path? Or am I just fooling myself? This is where many people turn back. Mistaking solitude for failure, in truth, it's the clearest sign that you're moving in the right direction. Every awakening must pass through this night. No one leaps straight into light without first walking through the shadow of their being. The dark night is where the ego dies, so the soul can be born. And though it may last months, even years, remember this: the darkness is not your enemy. It is your cleansing. It is peeling away every illusion, every false belief, until what remains is nothing but you. You are raw, unmasked, and real. Loneliness, loss, confusion, they are not your punishment. They are the necessary dissolving before the dawn of true freedom. After countless nights drifting through darkness, there comes a morning when you awaken and quietly realize something has changed. Not the world itself, but the way you see it. The light is the same, yet somehow warmer. The air feels familiar, yet it carries a calm, gentle stillness. You no longer chase meaning in everything, because you've begun to sense the meaning of simply being. This is the moment after the storm, when you step out of yourself, lighter, clearer, unfamiliar, but whole. You see now what you thought was lost was merely an old shell, and what you found is the essence that had always been there, free, quiet, unshakable. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to be more awakened than anyone else. You no longer need to argue about what's right or wrong. You simply are like a still lake reflecting the sky, and in that stillness, everything is already said. And then, just when you think you'll be alone forever, new people begin to appear. Not loud, not showy, but when your eyes meet, you just know. They too have walked through their own dark night. They understand you without needing words. They speak the same language. They communicate in a language of experience and silence. That is the final gift of the journey. After you've lost the old world, the universe gives you a new one, where connection is no longer built on roles, but on the resonance of souls. And in that moment, you finally see none of your losses were meaningless, because it was the space they left behind that became wide enough for truth to bloom. When the light returns, you are no longer who you once were, and yet strangely, the world around you remains the same. The people who once hurt and disappointed you are still moving to the same old rhythm. They still speak of the things you've already outgrown, and you begin to wonder, how do I love them without losing myself? How do I stay and remain true to who I am? That is the lesson of the middle path, the art of holding on and letting go at the same time. You hold on to gratitude, for they were once part of the journey that awakened you. You hold on to compassion, for you see, they too are still struggling within their cocoons. But you also let go. Let go of the need to be understood. Let go of the urge to pull them along with you. Let go of the fear that if they leave, you'll be alone again. You begin to see that true love does not cling. It simply is quiet, unforced, and unconditional. And sometimes, in its silence, something miraculous happens. People begin to change, not because you persuaded them, but because they saw in you something they hadn't yet found in themselves, a peace that comes not from control, but from acceptance. Some will still walk away, some will return, and some old relationships will be reborn, no longer built on roles or obligations, but on truth and freedom. You no longer have to choose between love and letting go, for you understand now that letting go is the purest form of love. And in that quiet space, you stop trying to hold anyone back, because what is real will stay, and what no longer belongs will simply dissolve like a morning mist fading softly under the rising sun. And then one day, you realize this journey was never about becoming someone else, but about returning to yourself. You look back at everything, the losses, the separations, the darkness, the confusion, and you see none of it was meaningless. Every person who left, every pain that broke you open, was a quiet, invisible hand gently pulling you out of your old cocoon. You finally understand. The caterpillar was never being punished when it had to die. It was being prepared to fly. That death was not an ending. It was transformation in motion. The ego dissolved so the soul could bloom. Every layer that once confined you, the roles, the labels, the expectations, has now become fertile ground for new life. And in that stillness, you begin to feel something sacred. Freedom was never about leaving the world. It was about living within it, without being imprisoned by it. No more fear of being misunderstood. No more hunger for validation. No more resistance to what is. You stop searching for the light because you realize you've been the light all along. The world continues to turn. People keep rushing along their paths, and you simply smile. Not the smile of someone who has won, but the smile of one who finally understands. There was never anything to win, for everything has always been unfolding exactly as it should. The butterfly opens its wings. No applause, no triumph, only a deep, wordless stillness, like dawn touching the surface of a quiet lake after a long night. And in that silence, you know, you have come home, not to where you once were, but to who you have always been. You are light, free, and whole. And that's the content of this episode. If you feel a sense of resonance with these reflections, don't forget to follow the channel and stay tuned for the upcoming episodes. See you soon. Bye.